Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. Relationships. What's right? What's wrong? How do we improve? With me is Dr. Linda Miles for a return engagement, which I'm really excited about. And we're going to talk about how we can improve a relationship, whether it's with a spouse, a significant other, or even in the workplace. And I would like to welcome back Dr. Miles.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back.
Linda, it's so wonderful having you back here again.
Thank you.
What is the key element, would you say, in a relationship?
The key element, Barry, I would say is connection, is being connected. Like, you know, I feel a connection with you right now. We're communicating. It's amazing how many couples become disconnected from each other.
What do you think causes that?
A failure to repair what goes wrong. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
All relationships have things that go wrong. For example, you have a mother and a child, and they're very connected, and the child does something wrong, and the mother has to punish the child, and they disconnect. But then a good parent goes back and repairs it and says, honey, I had to yell at you because you were going to get hit by a Mack truck. And then they reconnect. What we do in relationships is that we don't do that repair. A couple they're wonderfully, blissfully connected, and we read them fairy tales about how they're going to live happily ever after, but we don't teach them how to reconnect when they disconnect.
So when you're reconnecting, would you, and saying, okay, they have a fight, you have a fight.
Yes.
So whose responsibility is it to reconnect? Both?
Yes.
All right. But what if the person who's wrong sulks or, you know, doesn't want to reconnect or doesn't know how to reconnect?
Then you're not going to have a good relationship over time because you're not going to be able to repair it. You know, Barry, I used to wonder doing marriage counseling why I would see some couples that got brought into my office from the courthouse, literally getting a divorce, who would do really well. And other couples didn't seem like they had many problems and they wouldn't make it. And I realized it was because both of them stepped up to the plate. It's like both of them really worked hard on it. If you only have one person that's pulling on the oars, it's not going to work over time.
So you also came up with your 8 steps to a better relationship. And the first one you talk about is stop blaming.
Yes.
Stop blaming, start living. How do you do it?
Do you know that Hall & Oates song, I Don't Go For That?
No.
Do you remember this song? Well, there's a song, a famous song, and it's, you know, I don't go for that. You want to do these things to me, but I don't go for it. In a relationship, you don't have to blame someone if you don't participate in what they're doing. For example, I have a woman that I was seeing, Barry, and her husband would become very critical of her. And then she would go away and be really angry and distant and whatever. And I suggested to her that she basically, in so many words, next time he did it, let him know that she didn't go for that. And she literally said that to him. He started being really critical, and she said, you know what, I don't go for that, and walked out of the room. And he's like, but when we keep our integrity, when we don't participate in a destructive interaction, it doesn't happen.
So what happened? Did he change his motives?
He has to.
Okay.
He has to. Well, he could talk to a blank wall. Now, these things don't change overnight, and there is a tendency, I think, for men to run a relationship by trying to coach us, because that's how they were brought up, and that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to tell her everything that she was doing wrong, you know. And that's a real gender issue with men and women. They try to tell us what we're doing wrong. We get all offended because we don't handle things that way. And so you go back and forth. But The bottom line is you don't have to participate. Can I give you an example from my personal life?
You can.
In my life, for example, when I first married my husband, Barry, he told me that he was critical of his first wife, that he just took her inventory all the time. Now, I knew he was going to start that with me. And I remember the first time he started it. He was in another room. I was making him a sandwich, and I hear him saying all these critical things to me from the other room while I'm cooking lunch. So I went and put his lunch on the table. I went upstairs to get ready to go somewhere else. In other words, I don't go for that. And in a few minutes, he realized there was no one listening to that. And so he came up the stairs and he was kind of contrite. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to go to a meeting." But Barry, he was good. He caught himself. He knew what he was doing. I didn't have to say, "By the way, what were you doing saying 15 things that were wrong with me while I'm making lunch and you're in the other room?" So it's that kind of thing where you determine, you know what I tell women especially is, don't compromise your integrity. Keep your integrity. Don't participate in things that are destructive.
So in other words, what you're saying is to walk out of the room, hang up the phone, but the thing of it is, what you're also saying is don't talk back.
Right.
Because if you talk back and
get defensive,
then you start a whole argument.
It keeps it going. Let me talk briefly about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Okay.
Okay. Research has found, John Gottman out in Washington, and we talk about it in our book, The New Marriage. John Gottman's research found there's 4 behaviors that lead you straight to divorce, okay, if you do them long enough. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And generally you have one partner who does 2 of them, favors 2 of them, and one partner who favors the other 2. So if someone's being critical of you and you're not defensive, and you just say, "Well, I don't agree with that," it's hard for the conversation to continue, isn't it?
Right, because it's like you're not giving them fuel.
Exactly, you're not playing your part. And I had a woman realize that the other day. She went, "You know, Dr. Miles, I realized that I think I'm 50% responsible for what's wrong in this relationship." It was like it was a revelation to her. And I said, "No, you're not 50% responsible. You're 100% responsible. And so is he. You're both 100% responsible for what goes on in your relationships, in your life, and what you learn from it."
So don't fight back, hang up the phone, walk out of the room, and you don't fuel the fire.
Don't go for that. And by the way, they find that people who are what we would call a relationship virtuoso, those who have great relationships, that is basically their mantra. They just, if someone's being destructive, they go, "You know, there's something wrong with them. They're yelling and screaming and throwing things, and I don't want to get hit by this jar or whatever, so I'm out of here." I'm not, you know? So they don't collude. They don't participate. So it is a decision that no matter what, you're going to keep your personal integrity. And it is so hard to do that.
It almost works in a business relationship also.
Absolutely.
So if you don't give them fuel to the fire, if you don't add fuel to the fire,
the fire burns itself out.
Okay.
Yes. You move out of the way of a destructive interaction, and pretty soon you don't have destructive friends anymore. Because when you don't participate, they don't want to be your friend.
Because there's no fun in it.
There's no fun. That isn't what they do, you know. That's not their thing. So if you say, "I am 100% responsible for this relationship I'm in and for how it's going right now," and the other person says that, that's your best chance at making it work, because a good long-term relationship's a growing machine. And it's going to help you grow. It's going to help you figure out what you're doing yourself that's unhealthy. Usually we learned them from our family.
Well, it's hard to break habits that you've got, because It's almost like you want to defend yourself when somebody's attacking you.
Oh, I know, and you know, it's amazing. I remember. Well, I'm not over it, Barry. Don't get me wrong, but I have worked so hard on not being defensive, because I grew up with a brother and we argued all the time. We were close in age and we're sarcastic and argued, and I had trouble in work relationships with that, and I had trouble in relationships with men with that, where if they would get in an argument with me, I would just be throwing fuel all over the fire. And to stop myself from doing it was like stopping a freight train. And I remember my husband and I talking about it, because he would be critical, as I said earlier. And guess what? I would get defensive every time. And I'll never forget, it culminated one night in him going, well, now, Linda, if there was a jury of your peers here, they would all say that you were wrong. Whoa. And I went, this is crazy. What are you talking about, a jury of my peers? And then I thought, why am I even having this conversation? And I said to him, are you having fun? And he goes, no. And I said, well, neither am I. So why don't we figure out another way to do this? And that's another important word in a relationship, Barry. When I was saying, when you were asking me earlier what's most important, the connection, it's the we. It's that if you're not connecting with one another, can it? You know, if you're one person's being critical and one person's being defensive, you're not going anywhere. So, well, you want to hear yourself talk? You know what you think. You already know. Write it down.
Well, let's go back. You say avoid the fixer-upper syndrome.
Yes. Oh, that is so huge, particularly with women. They will see a man that they feel like has potential. He is potentially a good partner. And that is such a dangerous word, because potential is really not anything. They are what they are. And so I always tell women that I work with, don't marry potential. Marry who is, if you can accept who they are, then marry that person. And perhaps they might get better, perhaps they might get a little worse. But never mind this, how they could be in the best of all possible worlds.
It sounds like it takes a lot of energy if he's got the potential.
Very. Don't you know many women who are working on trying to fix their guy up?
That's a lot of energy.
It's a lot of energy. And it's a lot of being angry and attacking and critical and trying to mother them and shape them up. You know, use it for something else. Do paintings. Do something creative. Go find something that gets you somewhere. Write a book.
I remember I went out with this guy, and I went out with him for a while, and he would go into these pouting moods.
Yes.
And he would pout, and I would try to get him out of this mood.
To fix him.
Right, you know, like, what's wrong? You know,
Right.
And it would happen many times.
Yes.
And then one time, I said to him when he was pouting, I said, are you done yet?
Yes.
And do you know he never pouted after that?
Yes. Yes. Isn't that interesting?
Fabulous. Yeah.
I know. I know.
I have no idea what was going on.
What you did is you participated. Do you see what I'm saying? It's
Okay, so it was a participation.
you were participating, and that's what people need to see, is that they're part of the dance. And you don't need to focus on your partner's part of the dance and telling them how they're dancing wrong. Why are you pouting? Look how you pout. Look how you hang your head. You know, what's wrong with you? You need to say, what in the world am I doing spending 3 hours on a beautiful Sunday afternoon with someone who's pouting, and I'm sitting here asking them why?
Big waste of time.
Big waste of time.
Big waste of time. What is your favorite way that you suggest to keep a relationship going?
I use an acronym,
Okay.
which is CARE, okay? Again, it's easy to connect. We fall in love, we see some hunky person, and we just could gobble them up. We go, oh my gosh. And it's wonderful, okay? Until the A happens, and that is you move away from each other. something happens. They pout. You do something that's offensive to them, okay? That's where you have to repair it. And that's where we go wrong. Most people don't know how to repair it. To repair it, you have to be able to dialogue with the conflict and go, how are we going to work this out? What are we doing? Are we having fun? Is there a better way for us to do this? And then the last letter is E, which is empathy. And that is, you have empathy for yourself. In other words, you're not willing to let yourself sit there for 3 hours, Barry, telling someone they're pouting. You know, and you have empathy for the other person. You go, you know, I don't know why they're doing this, but I'm not going to sit here and give them an audience. And so with the empathy, you reconnect. So it's care. Connect. You connect. You move away. Then you repair it, and you reconnect.
Sounds simple, but it isn't always.
Oh, it's not easy to do. And very many of us, well, nobody had perfect parents. So no one knew how to kind of train our brain to go through those steps. And we didn't necessarily see people repair things. I know people whose parents were mad at each other for 50 years.
Oh my God.
And you probably do too. Haven't you been to some 50-year anniversaries where, you know, they're across the room from each other? They're not really connected. They've just endured.
Where do you see relationships going?
I have some fears about that. I don't see us getting really better at repairing. I think that, well, 50% divorce rate.
That's pretty high.
Many more people not getting married, many more people choosing to stay single, to stay in a single status because they can, economically, not knowing how to work out the problems that happen with marriage. I see fewer and fewer people who learn, who have the capability to stick it out, to have a lasting, loving relationship.
Do you think society has changed, so therefore the relationships have changed, or is it that people are becoming more independent? The Catholic Church has now agreed to, well, they really haven't agreed to, I guess, divorce, but divorce is a lot easier, and people have got their own money, so they don't have to stay in a bad situation.
You know what, Barry? I think it's not a whole lot different than it's ever been, because if you think about it, 100 years ago, the average marriage lasted 8.5 years. Because someone
8.5 years?
Yes. In 1900, the average marriage lasted 8.5 years. We didn't have penicillin. If you got an infection, you died. Oh, there were so many.
Okay.
So if you think of what was the probabilities of two people making it together, okay? You know how long the average marriage lasts now?
No.
8.5 years.
The same?
Yes. So I think we've got the same thing going on. We haven't figured out, we're telling people to stay together longer, but we're not giving them a better model. What I say, it's like we have a horse and buggy out on the LA freeway. You know, we send a little couple out in a horse and buggy, and we say, okay, kids, get in the traffic. And they're out there with their horse and buggy, and they have no tools. They don't know how to repair. They don't have the research, the sophisticated tools, the training. They don't have good models many times.
Do you find that there's a difference in relationships or the way people communicate between, let's say, New York and Florida? Because you practice basically in Florida and we're here in New York. Everything is the same.
It's about connection, Barry. You know, maybe you use a different language. Maybe you connect in different ways. Maybe you have Chardonnay instead of MD 2020. But the bottom line is, you either know how to connect or you don't. You either have those skills to retain it and repair and have good relationships, or you don't. It doesn't have to do with what restaurant you're in, what, you know, class you're in, any of that. It has to do with what your skills are.
And this is something somebody can learn. They can
Yes,
practice it.
Absolutely. Not easy. It's not
Right.
easy. But yes, you can practice journaling, really journal about yourself, get to know yourself. Hold yourself responsible for what you're doing. Learn your lessons. Like what you said, Barrie, you're just like, what am I doing? Why, and me going, why would I stand around making a sandwich for someone who's kicking me in the rear? You know, how stupid is that? It's learning those lessons over and over and over again. It's learning to have a good way. I love what the priest Desjardins said. He did a marriage once, and he said to the people that were getting married, he said, remember, there's the two of you and there's a baby, and that baby is your relationship. And if you don't take care of the baby, it will die.
Wow.
And people act like it's just those two people and that there's no connection, there's no relationship between them. That's not the nature of it.
When you're into a relationship, you're starting a relationship, what things should you be on the lookout for going into a relationship, you know, besides he's got potential?
Oh, yeah. Oh. Okay, forget about potential. The second is really look at what is true. Don't kid yourself. Another thing people will do is they'll get into a relationship with a man who says, I'm never getting married. Okay?
Right, because they think they're going to change them.
Yeah. And instead of just facing the fact, this person's never getting married, okay, do I want to be with them? It's terrible, okay? So you need to say what is real about this person. They're really married. They really have 2 children, okay? Never mind whatever kind of magical thinking that you have. Another thing I think is real important is get to know their family. Watch them with their family. And the other thing I think is critical is listen to how they talk about their former relationships. It's like I was saying earlier, my husband took responsibility that he was critical of his wife. He didn't say, oh, she was this terrible person. He said she was a good person and I wore her down. Okay? Jeez. I wore her down being critical.
So what made you marry him? He says that.
Denial. No, actually it was that he was willing to do the work on himself. Okay. That he was owning, you know, none of us are perfect, but if someone tells you, I was married to this witch, and she was a horrible person, and she treated me so wrong, and Barrie, I am an angel. I'm a wonderful person, and she was a witch. Run.
For the hills.
And just run as fast as you can because you're the next witch. So looking at their family, knowing about, do they have problems with their mother? Do they have problems with their father?
It's very interesting that you say that because when I would date a guy, they would always listen to what I said about my father especially.
Yes, smart.
And there's a very funny story I tell about my father, my relationship with him, and they just wait to see what happens. And then when I said my father just laughed, you know, you could just see the tension just melt away.
Yes, exactly. Well, they were smart if they're listening for that. Because, and even the relationships with your siblings. If you're an oldest, you may tend to be bossy. Just know if you're with an older child, they may be bossy. And you're going to have to work that out. You've got 2 older children together, they're going to try to boss each other around. So, but those are all workable things if you know what they are and you accept them in one another. And you don't get critical and you don't let the 4 horsemen stomp all over you.
Now what happens when, let's say, people are living longer, but they're also dying at an older age too? So you have widows and widowers.
Yes.
What kind of suggestions would you say for them?
You know, I have met some older people that are so wise about relationships because they've learned these lessons. I've had the privilege to work with some people who were like in their 70s in relationships. And I have to say that pretty much every couple I've worked with those ages have learned things the hard way. And they know about repairing. And they know about self-acceptance and accepting the other person. And I'm sure there are people who are not like that, but it's no different. The suggestions are no different than they are at any age. It's like educate yourself, take responsibility, learn your lessons, don't go for that.
Yeah, because what you're saying is when you learn them young, you can carry them through your whole life.
And Barry, you keep growing. The interesting thing is, I find the more connected I become with my husband and the more I grow with him, the more I grow with me. And that it carries over into other areas of my life.
So you're more accepting of yourself and others.
Yes, because as you're learning these relationship lessons and you see that you're no day at the beach yourself, it builds self-acceptance so that, well, I had an experience where I almost died and there was very little left of me, and I found that I really could accept myself because I had done so much work on that without an ability really to breathe. Mm-hmm. And Barry, that was the most interesting thing because I had this deep sense, and I was almost dead, deep sense that the only thing that had mattered in my life was how much I had loved. That nothing else had really amounted to much.
Woo.
Yeah, but it was a deep knowing. But I think a lot of that, again, came from many years of working on myself in relationships. Hard work.
Linda, in the closing moments of the show,
yes,
what would you like to leave the audience with?
I think I would leave them with what Joseph Campbell said. And what Joseph Campbell said is that to really grow up, and I think a good long-term relationship's a growing machine, that we need to learn to find joy amidst suffering. That you need to be able to find your own joy. And if someone else is pouting or they're going through a hard time or whatever, that you still know how to be a creative, vital person.
Linda, thank you so much for joining me. It's been wonderful having you back.
It's been wonderful being here.
Thank you. And I hope you've enjoyed yourself and learned something about relationships and how to keep them together. We'd love to hear from you, and Linda would be very happy to answer any of your questions. So please write us here at The Woman's Connection. Bye now.